Hello and welcome to today's video. Today I have another installment in my little mini looks and reviews series. If you're not familiar with this, it's just a way for me to get to know a bunch of palettes in my collection that I have not used. So today we're going to be talking about the Profusion Ethereal palette. Why don't we go ahead and get into it. Okay, as we get started today, I have 4 looks for you, and then I have some swatches to a similar, some similar shades in different palettes. Let's go ahead and jump into look number 1. I'm going to be inserting some clips here, and for look number 1, I wanted to keep things pretty neutral, just because this is a very colorful palette, so I always want to pull at least one neutral look from it. And for this one, it was super simple. I kind of went with this like orangey shade, this matte shade, both kind of in the crease a little bit. I deepened the outer corner with this brown down here, just a hair. Honestly, it's mostly these two. And then on the lid, I had this like shade in Sun Drenched here. It's just a nice coppery, like orangey shade. I figured it was a nice fall look and that I would at least showcase it and throw it in here. Not the most complex look, but I just wanted to kind of prove that you can do something super neutral with this like pretty colorful palette. Now moving into look number 2, we're doing a little bit more color here. This one I really quite liked a lot. I honestly, when I first looked at this palette, I was drawn to the shade up here. It's just a beautiful purpley pink kind of shimmer. It looks like it's going to be nice and glittery, which is like, I like a chunkier metallic with glitter in it. That's like just I could eat those up. So I went with this guy all in my crease, this kind of like light lavendery purple outer corner, and just a little bit of depth in the outer corner. And then I actually had this on my lid too, and just because I was a little bit worried if this was a little bit of a sheerer base, I wanted to make sure it pulled pink, or not pink, purple, and not too pink. And I was not disappointed with the shade. It is a little bit more of a like sheer base than I thought it would be, but when you look at it in the pan, it looks like it's going to be a little bit more purple. I think on the eyes, if you don't put down like a base, it will pull more pink, if that makes sense. But that is a stunning shade. Now swatching these two guys, like this guy, for some reason this shade is not as like chunky and dimensional as that purpley pink that's on my lid. It's still pretty. Hopefully you can see there. It's just not quite as special to me, but I feel like you could create this look with this shade too, and it would be almost the same. But yeah, that is look number 2. Now moving into look number 3, this one's probably my favorite because this shade over here ended up being my favorite in the palette. It's honestly a toss-up between those two. The shade is called Fluorescence. Let me give you a swatch of it. Hopefully you can see right there, that shade. It's a really beautiful shade. It's reminding me of a couple others in my collection, so in the review portion of this video, I will give you some other swatches. But for this look, I wanted to kind of just let that be the star of the show because it is a gorgeous shade. So I just kind of did this little brown shade in my crease, and I think I wanted it to pull a little bit more cool tone than what it pulls. It's a little bit more warm, so I had like a contour shade that I mixed in with it a little bit, and then I threw that all over the lid. One of those like easy, almost one and done, two and done shades for me, and I was really happy with that look. Honestly, that is a look that I would wear every single day. I just think it's a really beautiful shade. And yeah, that is look number, I think, 3. Now look number 4, that was look number 3. I'm losing my mind a little bit, but today's look is the one I'm wearing. Pretty simple. I have this like little warm brown shade all up in my crease, and then this is like the third, I would say, like special shade in this palette. I think these 3 are the standouts for me. Another like chunky, but it's got a little bit more of like a clear base, so it's not super pigmented in terms of like base color. Kind of more of a topper shade, but I just kind of put it all over my lid. That, again, brown in the crease, and then on the outer corner I did not deepen it up. Instead, I thought this shade was pretty similar in tone to the shirt, so I figured I really wanted to try to use the blues in this palette because there are a number of blues, and so I was like, at least pick a blue and try to use it, DaLin, even though I'm not typically comfortable in blues. And when I'm not typically comfortable in a color, I like take the easy way out and do a wing with it. So I use that to create like a little bit of a smoky wing on the outside. I do like this look and I would wear this out. So while it's not the most creative thing, if you're like me and you want to play with color but you get a little intimidated, maybe try a wing, because that's what I like to do. But yeah, that's look number 4. Let's go ahead and move on into the like mini review of this. Now, I have to admit, I'm coming off of wearing a lot of high-end palettes, and the last review that I would have filmed is the Hello review, and so that palette is an indie brand, very high quality. I'm using the ABH Nouveau palette, highly pigmented, high quality. Pat McGrath, one of the ones that I'm reaching for at the moment, trying to create looks with, highly pigmented, high quality, and the Melt Gemini, another super pigmented, high quality palette. And when I like, it's going up against like super strong competitors, right? And I had to remind myself and remember that this palette doesn't quite perform on those levels. Not saying that it's bad, but these shades you have to build a little bit, and specifically mostly talking about especially a lot of the mattes in here. Now, like I played around with a couple looks that I didn't film because I didn't really love them, with some of these like pinks, and I believe this blue, like I'm very attracted to this blue, but I didn't really love the way like it built on me. Let me see if I can show you what I mean with this blue. Like I had a look in mind with this blue, and I just couldn't seem to, like when I go to blend it, it's pretty like faint, and it requires a little bit more, I don't know, packing on than I would like to. But then again, I'm remembering that also the name of this palette is Ethereal, so I think that in terms of what they were probably going for, they probably nailed it. Like a lot of these shades end up being a little softer. I will say the one thing I'm a little bummed about in this palette is like these three shimmers. I know I've already mentioned they're really good. They're really good. And like these guys down here, I find them to be way, like just a different formula maybe. This one almost feels like a pressed glitter, and it's just kind of chunky, but not as pretty as like some of these that I have featured in some of the looks. And then these guys just perform like mediocre metallic shades, sadly. Not a lot of oomph behind them. Like these guys are like soft, they are like, they have a lot of glitter in them, and just a lot of dimension, almost a little duochromeness to them. And these I am a little bit underwhelmed by, if that makes sense. All in all though, really not a bad palette, and I am very glad to have it in my collection. I want to pull this back out in the spring next year, because I feel like maybe at that time I'm a little bit more comfortable in these tones in the spring probably, and maybe I'll feel inspired in a different way, and my opinion might change of this palette. And not that it's a bad palette, I just, when I compare it to other like super high-end palettes at the moment, it's not wowing me like I want it to. That being said, these three shades here are like the star of the show. Again, I will say that they do remind me a lot of some other super high-end palettes. So let me go ahead and swatch those three on the back of this hand, and then I'll show you some other shades that are not exact dupes, but they give me the same similar vibe, if that makes sense. Correction, I'm not going to be doing the gold that I have on my lid, because I feel like a lot of palettes have those like yellowy, goldy topper shades in them. But I have these two guys swatched. First off, because I just did a look with this guy. This guy down here, and this one is maybe similar to the one I have on my lid, but really this one's a lot more special. It's got a little bit more of a multi-chromeness to it, has a little like green in it, a little bit of peachiness to it, just a different shade in general. I'll give you a swatch of it. You might not be able to see it because this camera doesn't always capture things well, but this is the Hella palette, and then this is the shade that I have on my lid. Again, just not the same quality, but this guy is kind of similar. Again, not the same, not an exact dupe for the shade, but it just kind of gives me similar vibes. The Hella palette is swatched here, and this is the Profusion shade. Now the Hella palette I think has more of a green cast to it, maybe a similar base tone, like that kind of plummy, real sheer base. But this one, the Profusion, has a little bit more blue, where this one has a little bit more kind of a green shift. Another multi-chrome that I wanted to kind of swatch for you is the Pat McGrath, the new one. This is the Mothership, I believe it's number 10. And this guy here is the like true multi-chrome in the palette. Hopefully you can see that. Another one that gives me kind of similar vibes in the fact that it has that like purpley sheer plum base. Hopefully you can see it right here swatched. But again, way more intense, much better quality, and just has a little, actually in terms of the shimmer in it, I would say it has a little bit more of a blue one, whereas I said before that Hello one had more of green. But again, hopefully you can see the difference in terms of intensity. If you wanted to kind of get a very similar vibe. You could probably get the Ethereal over spending the money on that guy, but it's delicious. And then the last palette that I thought of in terms of having really beautiful sparkly shifty shades is this one from Huda Beauty. This is the Rose Quartz palette. I will have a video on this one eventually too, but I wanted to swatch maybe these three, although I think this one's mostly purple. This one and this one, I can't remember. I had in my head before sitting down to film this video which one would be the one that I should swatch, and here I am not being able to remember. So let's see if I can swatch these three. So this one is going to be the bottom one right here, called Moon Magic. Very like glittery sparkly shade, probably most similar to that pink one that was in look number 2. And then this guy here, Blissful, is this shade right here. Again, the one that reminds me most of that like kind of plum base, but this one also has a, like that bluish kind of sheen. And then I honestly think it looks a little bit more similar to the Pat McGrath shade instead of the Profusion shade. And then the purple one in the middle is that very top one called Cosmic Love, and I don't think it's, maybe if these two had a baby, like it had a little bit more purple base slash a more pink glitter running through it, you might have those together. But yeah, I wanted to give you a little swatch of all of those. So again, Profusion, and then mostly Pat McGrath kind of here, and then Huda Beauty up here. Again, not the same quality, but you could kind of match some vibes if you really wanted to. So I thought that would be fun. I love to see swatches, and that's kind of it for today's video. So I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you say hello in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.